Okay, today I'm joined by Kate Strong. Kate is a world champion triathlete, entrepreneur, coach, consultant, TEDx speaker, Reiki master, philanthropist. The list is almost endless, and it's going to be a very interesting conversation today. We're going to explore the importance of mindful leadership, culture, people development, holistic well-being, and especially getting managers and business leaders to focus as much on their people as their business. And Kate is certainly very well qualified to kind of lead us through this this very, very interesting topic, which I guess is really resonating with a lot of people right now as people are getting furloughed and going into isolation and business needs to survive. So welcome to the conversation, Kate.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Neil.
So tell us a little bit about your story. This is a big kind of lead in, I guess, to this with all the various kind of sort of facets that make up Kate. It'd be very interesting to hear a little bit about sort of your background and kind of what brought you to this point here today.
Yeah, it's always interesting looking back on our lives, because when we're doing something in our past, it's very hard to know what that will open up for us in the future. So with hindsight, I can see how all parts of my lives actually led me to being who I am today, as you know, that coach, philanthropist and investor, etc. But back in the day, I couldn't really see it. So I started off, I'm from a town in Wales, from a very loving and normal family. And there was no real challenges, no reason for me to sort of question or step outside of the norm or to question what was going on. I didn't struggle with hardship. I didn't struggle with pain. I had an abundant life, if you want, as a child. Yet something inside of me kept sort of asking, is this for everyone? Does everyone have this sort of quality of life that I'm taking for granted? And so that sort of opened up the world of exploration, which pushed me down the path of conforming, but also swinging away from conforming and traveling as well. So I conformed by going to university and graduating with a double master's in mechanical engineering. I was good at maths, but I never really did it for passion. It was a logic choice. I was led by my brain and to satisfy the need for my parents to have a child with a degree. Yet something in my heart said, let's get out and explore the real world. Because to me, what we learn inside a box, a university or an establishment, isn't real. It's what we're told is real. And so that led me down to traveling quite extensively in Latin America and setting up micro businesses, realizing that we can change somebody's world with just $2 by setting up a small business for them or teaching them how to create that passive or consistent income that we sometimes neglect in our own lives. And I then swung the pendulum back to normality and conforming, where I did work in aerospace and also the fashion industry as an engineer. Yet it's very hard for me anyway to live a life of logic in business without listening to my heart. I didn't want a life where on Friday night I'd switch off with that glass of wine or going out to the pub, and Sunday evenings would fill me with regret that yet again I was going to be wasting part of my life in a job that didn't satisfy me. And that prompted me to emigrate to Australia and to carve my own path. I didn't want to work in aerospace or engineering. It wasn't my passion. So I opened up a Subway franchise and fell into hospitality. I loved serving. I loved interacting with people. I loved finding out what they needed, in simplest of terms, in what they wanted in their sandwiches, but also find out behind the scenes what was inspiring them in their own journeys. And so I stayed within hospitality for 9 years in Australia. I opened my own guest house, restaurant and wine bar as well. And the thing that was the tipping point for me was quite a personal journey. So I was with my Welsh partner for 9 years. We'd owned the businesses together, and just 6 days before our wedding, he left. But he also left me not just emotionally struggling, but financially as well. So I was $1 million in debt. The whole business was left to me to run. And I think that was my awakening in business, to realize that I'd always been putting other people and other needs in front of me rather than addressing my own wants in life. I thought, when I have more money or when I have more time, then I can sort out my business. Then I can do something that really inspires me. Then I can take up sport. And at that moment, that cliff edge moment in my life, that's when I saw that I'd been wasting 9 years of my life for a perfect moment that just didn't exist. If I wanted a business, if I wanted a life, if I wanted a thriving experience, I had to start making it in that moment, in today, because today is all we really have. And that's when it opened up my world in my personal life to strive for things that I never did strive or even dream of before, because I didn't think I could or would be judged. And so I took up triathlon, and that's, a couple of years later, I was on Team Australia. I was very blessed on the race day in the World Championships to be the best. My best was the best in the world, and I became world champion. But I also then opened up in work, people asking me, how did I do this? How did I manage my time? How did I become more effective? How did I dare to dream big too? And that brought me to today, if you want, fast forwarding, that I'm now monetizing the access of other people's how they can unlock their own potential to achieve what they want to in their life, yet are finding internal resistance. So that's a very long answer to your question, but that's pretty much my backstory to who I am today.
And I think certainly when we hear people's backstories, I mean, that is just, to cram that into so few years, really, that whole kind of, multiple, for lots of people, multiple kind of life experience, I think is really fascinating. And for me, the thing I've picked out of there is that I guess there are some real pivotal moments where, there's almost like a forced or enforced change, or that you're required to make some really, really profound kind of life decisions, and you can either almost make or break it at those points. And there were sort of 2 or 3 pivotal points there, I guess, that you've just described, where you could have, if you'd made the wrong choices, almost come out of it in a very sort of negative or very challenging way, was actually by putting the right kind of mindset. Now, this will be something that we'll explore a little bit later, but putting the right kind of mindset, determination, clarity, I guess, in place, you were able then to sort of almost craft the next stage of your life in a sort of a proactive, but almost quite controlled and, positive way. Is that kind of fair to say, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's all through experience. So at that point when I did, I call it the cliff edge moment, when my partner left me, etc. And there were a few others as well in my life. We're either pushed or we can jump. But at the end of the day, we're stepping out of our comfort zone, and it's our own belief whether we call it falling or flying or learning to fly. So yeah, it's definitely comes from our mindset. And sometimes we do wait for the external to create those moments rather than us seeking them out, because it is uncomfortable and we're naturally disinclined to find those moments.
Just coming really back to this whole thing about the internal and external, I mean, certainly if you're, I guess you could call it the right kind of person in terms of like in business and sort of leadership or management, and you're able just intrinsically to be able to spot those moments and to be able to, bring it from within, rather than it being kind of enforced onto you, then I think you're probably quite a rare breed, probably in the current sort of climate, because I think most people in any kind of organisation, sort of large, small, public sector, private sector right now, with obviously the situation that we're in, are finding that this kind of external world is almost sort of crafting and defining what they are as a business. I mean, what kind of, when you talk to sort of business leaders, entrepreneurs, what kind of things are they sort of talking to you about? Where are their sort of pain points really at the moment?
I think the people I've spoken to recently, it's about satisfying their clients. So, I mean, to generalize massively, there are 2 main camps. One that sees this as a huge opportunity, a way to step up and show direction and leadership and become that pioneer for positive change, to say to the world, yes, we're going through some crisis, but now is the time to actually reset the bar and say this is now the new normal and how we can move forward from there. And the other set are seeing what the scarcity, what we're missing out on, what we're losing, what we have to give up, rather than seeing that, to use the analogy, if I've got my hands closed around something, if I can't give it up, I won't be able to receive something maybe larger and better for me. So we've got these 2 major camps. And what I'm hearing from the camp of positivity, if we want to call it that, it's about giving their clients the permission to make the changes, because we are surrounded by media, by news of what is going wrong, of the tolls of pain, of unemployment, of the furlough numbers, of what this will negatively impact our health and our financial health as well. But it's about letting that go, honoring its presence, and still moving forward and giving people the support to still keep working forward and making the positive changes. So I think it's still internal, even though we're seeing external change.
That's fascinating, actually, because one of the things I think for me that I'm sort of picking up from that, and this kind of polarity between the fear-based and the positive-based sort of people, and I think certainly I would sort of reflect that's certainly conversations that I've had, you know, with my connections and networks over the last sort of couple of weeks. I think for me, the interesting thing is if somebody is in one of those camps that maybe is a little bit kind of more fear-based and, you know, feeling sort of serving of the external environment, of being almost a little bit out of control, and like, you know, the world is doing this to them, or the situation is doing this to them, and they kind of almost have this desire to move into the more, I guess, sort of confident, more sort of perceived as kind of more successful style of sort of business management or leadership, however you want to sort of term it. Kind of what are the things do you think that people should be then, if they're in this kind of fear-based camp and aspiring to get into the other camp, what kind of things would they be sort of, I guess, trying to focus on first? I mean, to me, one of the words that sort of came out of what you've just said there was just this feeling of empathy, really just being sort of more empathetic with, you know, as you say, clients, but also possibly the people around them. Would that be a good starting point?
Yeah, I mean, the first starting point they're already on, which is they've acknowledged where they are and they don't want to be there. So that's an amazing first step. There's a lot of people who are there who are unaware that they're there. So by acknowledging that they want to change something is a great starting point. And then, yeah, as you described, empathy, being able to open up our vulnerability to express where I am isn't where I want to be. Can you help me? That is a huge challenge for some, and it was for me. My name is Kate Strong, so to show any sign of weakness was very difficult for me, because I was born to not ask for help and trained to not ask for help. But that is something that is actually the most powerful and strongest, excuse the pun, thing we can do. So if anyone is acknowledging that they're feeding the dark wolf, if we want to use that analogy, rather than the white wolf, acknowledging that we need to stop that and asking people how we can switch. It will enroll the people around us, will enroll our team, will enroll our peers, as well as our employees and suppliers and the clients as well. They can then help us move forward. So that's the first step. And for me, the next step would be micro changes, starting with myself as a leader, acknowledging what language we use. If we use words like, I don't want to be like this, rather than I want to be like this, focus more on positive, empowering words, rather than looking at the negativities, and making sure that the actions marry up with what we describe as well.
I love the way that you talk about that kind of recognition of things, and it is about, I think, being really kind of honest and true and authentic with yourself. I mean, it's all very well talking about how great you are as a leader with other people, but actually, unless you're properly authentic with yourself, it's a very, very kind of, as you talked before about the sand rather than kind of like a rocky sort of base. And I think it's really important that people kind of understand that it's okay to kind of go inside and open up and be vulnerable. And this whole vulnerability thing, I think, is really interesting, as you say, particularly in strong leadership, which is always defined from an ego stance, you know, where people are sort of, you know, meant to be strong, meant to be, you know, dependent, self-dependent and confident. I mean, I know one of the phrases that you have talked about, I've seen certainly in the past, where you talk about being bold, confident, and a heartfelt leader. It feels to me like there's a really interesting kind of dynamic there, because do those things all sit together? Because being heartfelt feels like being bold and confident is something sort of quite different. How do you see those things kind of intermixing?
For me, I see them as they mix beautifully. for example, for heartfelt, it's being in touch with our own awareness, knowing on our personal values as well as our business values. So I wouldn't work with a company or for a company that didn't match my values, nor would I, as a business leader, be able to drive my company forward if the values were out of sync. So being able to touch into our heart, into our intuition, knowing what's right and what we want intrinsically in our life, then means we can confidently, boldly say no. Say no to clients we don't want to work with. Say no to suppliers that don't match our own values as well. Say no to working with other collaborators that are out of sync with us. So for me, being heartfelt gives us the permission to be bold in saying no, and also then the other side of the coin, saying yes to what works, to connections such as what we've made ourselves and being able to be on this podcast, to find our tribe and find people with similar values facing in similar directions. So for me, it's a great way to accelerate my journey and make sure I achieve higher goals and enjoy the moment today, not sacrificing, working too hard and sort of saying next year then I can be happy. Today I'm happy because I'm heartfelt and I lead with confidence.
And I think there's a lot of people talking about this as almost being the new paradigm, the new way that businesses are kind of rated and valued. Obviously, in the old world, and the old world like last year and earlier, it was very much driven by kind of the profit success, the financial success of a business. I mean, how do you see businesses who become or potentially are going to be more sustainable in the future? I mean, you talk about sustainability as making a long-lasting impact, and I'm guessing this is going to come from this kind of co-creation, this collaboration, this being part of the network that you talk about. Is that almost like the new definition of business as you see it going forward?
Yes, I think it is. And, touching on what you said, Neil, I agree with you that in the past, we were focused at profit at all cost. We saw growth as a way of measuring success, forgetting that I don't want to grow all my life. I've reached, just a silly example, I've reached a certain height. I'm 5'9", I'm very happy. I don't want to keep growing all the time. So businesses don't have to grow to demonstrate success or legacy. So it's not the size, it's the impact. And it's beautiful to see that the government as well as businesses have caught up on that. A lot more language is being used about I feel rather than it is logical to do. We're getting more empathetic. We're trusting our instinct and our guts. We're bringing more human into a highly automated and systemized business environment. So for me, to be sustainable, it has to be profitable. Because a business, if it's not making money, will not last, will not be able to support its employees or keep delivering high quality goods and services. But the other side as well is to implement and to integrate sustainability for everyone impacted by that business, be them your employees, be it the families of your employees, so the social aspect, as well as what we're doing with the waste, as well as how we're sourcing our raw products as well. So that's the environment, the planet aspect. So to use a term that's been coined, there's a triple bottom line that businesses are now looking at, which is for profit, for people, and for planet. And for me, I like a bedrock on for purpose as well.
I guess this applies to, your big kind of multinational brands that everybody's heard of on the high street, all the way down to, the small local business, because in essence, what we're talking about here is it's a mindset, I guess, and a kind of a culture, to use that word. I mean, how would you say if somebody was a business owner, entrepreneur, business leader of maybe a medium-sized organization? I mean, where would they kind of start to begin to create this kind of sustainable, positive culture within their business?
For me, it's always about awareness of where we currently are. Some companies are doing excellent unconsciously at certain elements of sustainability. That might be recycling, that might be supporting local communities, that might be giving a great cultural environment for their employees. So on some spectrum of this sustainability, they're doing very well. They're champions, if you want. So the first thing is bring awareness, knowing where these businesses are doing well as where they maybe are falling down and need a bit more support. And then it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is sharing this knowledge, sharing where they currently are with the key stakeholders, the employees and suppliers, and also anyone else invested in the business. And then together create that roadmap. I can almost guarantee within any medium organization, there will be champions of these different aspects of sustainability. Discover who they are and empower your employees to become those cheerleaders within your organization, because they will create solutions that you never even thought possible and achieve targets you would didn't imagine to put out for fear of repercussion. So it's about making sure that it's worked as a team and a collaboration. So again, it comes down to openness, transparency, and clarity to give people the space to find the solutions themselves.
There's something really nice about the way you describe this in terms of almost like it's like a holistic view of business rather than just sort of the linear view of people and profit and products. And it feels like this is a much more kind of joined up thing. And I'm guessing a lot of that comes from the varied kind of life experiences and journey that you've had that you described at the start of this conversation. I mean, you're presumably an advocate also of kind of having strategy. So rather than just it being about heartfelt, everyone hugging trees and feeling good about stuff, actually there is almost then to kind of almost join the circle here, there is this kind of link with business planning and strategy. So kind of on the kind of process side of things, what would that mean in sort of Kate Strong words? You know, how is that kind of described as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because I love integrating aspects that shouldn't really be put together. As you know, I'm a Reiki master, which is very woo-woo and energy, and I'm also an engineer, which is hugely tolerance-based and scientific, etc. So yeah, for business, I love watching, and it's just me reflecting on what I see rather than me generating and creating it. More and more businesses are acknowledging we're not robots. We don't turn up at 9 o'clock completely switched off from whatever was happening at home and produce X amount of output every single day and return home at 5 to repeat ongoingly and indefinitely. So it's about adding that fluidity within business. And it's great to see companies now showing that flexibility to bring humanity in. So there isn't a 5-point plan to making 10x your income, or a 7-point plan to save the world, or anything like that. Every organization is actually made up of living organisms, organizations and individuals, and allowing them to vibrate, to connect with the different people they want to within that, but within the framework is very important. But if I was to walk inside my organization and talk to my employees and say, I want us to reach target X, I want us to reduce carbon by 27%, and I want you to do it by A, B, and C. Personally, if I was told that, I would resist it, because I don't operate in that way. I'm not given my creativity and my personal space to add my own value. So organizations are now bringing that mindset into their own work as well, letting employees work the way that they want to work rather than us tell them. We've got multiple senses. Some people are auditory, other people are visual. So why would I dictate how you deliver results in sustainability or in your job? And I see the shift in organizations allowing people to do that. And yes, coming back to your question or your comment, it is important to create that roadmap that, like any great road trip, we've got to account for challenges. We've got to account for that puncture, filling up on gas, someone needing a bathroom break that we didn't schedule. So it's giving us that flexibility. So we've got the goals in stone, but the journey is kept in sand.
For me, there's a really interesting difference there between what I would have talked about and thought you would have meant by peak performance, because as a triathlete, triathlete, to me, peak performance then is all about your times, how you performed, your physiology, how you're feeling at the end of the event, etc., etc. So quite a sort of an evidence-based kind of process-driven thing. But actually, what you're describing peak performance here then is it's very much about there's a personal element to it. It's almost like you have to sort of self-define what peak performance is, both as an individual but also as a business. And it's almost like nobody else's opinion really matters, because it is actually all about, you know, you setting the targets, you setting the expectations, you communicating it, and it becomes a very personal thing that somebody can then really own. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is. And it's interesting because when I started doing triathlon, I actually said before completing a triathlon, I wanted to be #1 in the world, an Ironman. And I always said that not because I wanted to beat everyone and because I had something to prove, or I was going to smash it and do it that sort of, you know, ego generated way. I did it from the aspect that I wanted to try a new sport, but I didn't want to limit my own potential and my own capacity. And if I was to aim for 100th or just a finisher or a certain time, then I would aim for it and I'd get close to it and I'd be happy. I'd be satisfied. But I didn't know if my capacity could be higher. So to honor who I could potentially be in a future that doesn't yet exist, and I'm not arrogant to say that I enough to know that I know what the future is, I had to aim for #1, purely to allow my potential to blossom to its maximum. Now that may have been 100th. In fact, it was #1 in long distance, and not Ironman, but a slightly different distance. But I found my maximum by allowing me anything is possible attitude. And business can do the same as well. It's, you know, the blue sky thinking, but we very rarely then create the plan to implement it. We look at the blue sky and go, what's our logic then clicks in? You go, what is actually realistic? Let's halve that. Let's do this over a longer period of time. Let's shelve this section, and we start logically carving away our potential. All I'm inviting organizations to do is aim for the maximum, because we can achieve it. We're living so beneath our potential, and organizations too, as proven, like in the space of just 1 month, companies that would never have imagined, we're now becoming so innovative in functioning in a world that we never thought would be so impacted. I don't know one country or one person that hasn't profoundly changed their operating procedures of, you know, waking up and living and eating and working. So we can do this. And so I'm just invite the organizations to always keep that potential and have that structure for success, but it has to be the top. We're not going to compromise the values. Don't compromise your possibility and your potential too.
I have no doubt whatsoever that these words are going to resonate with a lot of people. So if they're looking to maybe take the next steps for their business or personally, how can they engage with you? How can they contact you? And what would those next steps be?
Thanks, Neil. Well, my name is Kate Strong. I'm quite easily found on Google. And my website is katestrong.co. That's it at the end. The best thing also is to find me on LinkedIn. I'm there pretty much every day, or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram as well. But I just love hearing other people's journeys as well. So if you've got a comment or want to share how you've achieved what you've done in your life, then please reach out to me as well.
So thank you so much, Kate, for what has been a really, really interesting conversation. I've really enjoyed exploring some of these concepts with you. And I think for everybody listening, this is going to be a little bit of an opportunity to maybe pivot, to maybe make some of those decisions and start to think about, you know, your business and kind of how it can start to add value in this new, as we've described it, more sustainable world going forward. So Kate Strong, thank you very, very much for joining me today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Neil.